The Four Pillars of Self-Mastery, a science-based guide to transforming your words, thoughts, emotions, and wealth. Introduction: The Invisible Architecture of Your Life. In 2019, a neuroscientist at Stanford University made a disturbing discovery. After analyzing brain scans of over 3,000 adults, she found that people who felt stuck in life shared a nearly identical neural pattern, a weakened connection between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. In simple terms, the bridge between intention and action was crumbling. But here's what made her research revolutionary. That bridge could be rebuilt, not through medication, not through years of therapy, through deliberate daily practices that rewired the brain's architecture. You're holding what could be the most important book you'll ever read, not because I wrote it, because of what it reveals about you. Right now, as you read these words, four invisible forces are shaping every outcome in your life. They determine whether you'll be wealthy or struggling, loved or lonely, peaceful or anxious. These forces operate beneath your conscious awareness, running like background software that you never chose to install. They are how you speak, how you think, how you feel, and how you relate to money. Consider this. The average person speaks approximately 16,000 words per day. That's 5.8 million words per year. Each word creates a ripple effect, strengthening relationships or poisoning them, opening doors or slamming them shut. Yet most people have never spent a single hour learning how to use this extraordinary power. Or consider your thoughts. Cognitive scientists estimate you generate between 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts daily. Roughly 80% of those thoughts are negative and 95% are repetitive, the same mental loops playing on endless repeat. Your brain, that magnificent 3-pound universe, has become a prison of its own making. Then there are your emotions. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience has only recently confirmed. Emotions are not things that happen to you, they are things you construct. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett's groundbreaking research at Northeastern University demonstrated that your brain doesn't react to the world, it predicts it. Your emotional life is, quite literally, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And money? The relationship most people have with money is inherited, unconscious, and often self-destructive. A landmark study by Cambridge University found that financial habits are largely formed by age 7. You've been operating from a child's money script for decades. Here's the question that haunts me. What would your life look like if you mastered all four? What if your words became precision instruments capable of inspiring others, resolving conflicts, and opening opportunities you never imagined? What if your mind became a sanctuary rather than a battlefield? What if your emotions served you instead of sabotaging you? What if money flowed toward you because you understood its psychology? This isn't motivational fantasy. This is applied neuroscience, behavioral economics, and cognitive psychology distilled into a practical framework. I call it the 4 pillars of self-mastery. Unlike typical self-help approaches that treat these areas separately, this book recognizes what researchers have known for decades. Speech, thought, emotion, and financial behavior are interconnected systems. Change one, and you influence the others. Master all four, and you fundamentally transform who you are. The Japanese have a concept called kaizen, continuous improvement through small, incremental changes. The ancient Greeks spoke of arete, the ongoing pursuit of excellence. This book combines both, practical daily actions grounded in timeless wisdom. You won't find empty platitudes here. Every principle is backed by peer-reviewed research. Every strategy has been tested in real-world conditions, and every chapter builds upon the last, creating a comprehensive architecture for personal transformation. But I must warn you, this book will challenge you. It will ask you to examine beliefs you've never questioned, habits you've never noticed, and patterns you've unconsciously accepted as just who I am. The good news? You're not who you think you are. You're who you practice being. Let's begin. Part 1. The Power of Intentional Speech. Chapter 1. The Neuroscience of Words. Your tongue weighs approximately 70 grams. It's a muscular organ primarily designed for tasting food and facilitating swallowing. Yet this small piece of tissue has toppled governments, launched revolutions, ended marriages, and built empires. In 2017, researchers at the University of Arizona attached recording devices to 396 participants for 17 hours daily over several days. They discovered something remarkable. The quality of a person's relationships could be predicted with 82% accuracy simply by analyzing their speech patterns, not what they said about their relationships, how they spoke in general. Words are not merely communication tools. They are neurological events that physically alter the brains of both speaker and listener. When you speak a word, your brain activates the motor cortex, auditory cortex, and Broca's area simultaneously. The word travels through air as sound waves, enters another person's ear, and triggers their auditory cortex, Wernicke's area, and emotional centers. In approximately 400 milliseconds, your internal state has been transmitted into another human being's nervous system. Dr. Andrew Newberg, a neuroscientist at Thomas Jefferson University, has spent decades studying how words affect brain function. His research reveals that a single negative word can increase activity in the amygdala, the fear center, releasing dozens of stress hormones that impact memory, sleep, appetite, and immune function. The effect can last for hours. But here's what makes his findings transformative. The opposite is equally true. Positive, intentional words stimulate the frontal lobes, enhancing cognitive function, increasing motivation, and promoting the release of dopamine and serotonin. Your words are, quite literally, pharmacological agents. The ancient Buddhist tradition speaks of right speech as one of the 8 paths to enlightenment. The Hebrew Bible warns that death and life are in the power of the tongue. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus advised his students to speak only when their words improved upon silence. These weren't spiritual metaphors. They were empirical observations about human psychology made centuries before we had fMRI machines to confirm them. Consider the case of Hiroshi Tanaka, a mid-level manager in a Tokyo electronics company. For 15 years, Tanaka began every team meeting with the same phrase, "Let me tell you what's wrong with this proposal." He believed he was being helpful, thorough, analytical. His team experienced him as someone who crushed creativity and punished initiative. Turnover in his department was 3 times the company average. During a mandatory leadership training, Tanaka was introduced to a simple practice. Before speaking, ask 3 questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If the answer to any question was no, he would either remain silent or reformulate his response. The transformation took 6 months. Tanaka didn't become a different person. He became more of who he actually was. His natural intelligence and attention to detail, once experienced as criticism, became valued as mentorship. His department's turnover dropped to below company average. 3 years later, he was promoted to director. What changed? His words. The practice of intentional speech operates on 3 levels: timing, content, and delivery. Timing refers to knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Research from Harvard Business School demonstrates that in negotiations, the party who speaks last often secures better outcomes. Silence creates cognitive dissonance in others, prompting them to fill the gap, often with concessions or information they hadn't intended to share. Content means choosing words that serve your intention rather than merely expressing your reaction. There's a profound difference between saying, "You're wrong," and "I see it differently." Both communicate disagreement. One creates defensiveness, the other invites dialogue. Delivery encompasses tone, pace, volume, and body language. UCLA professor Albert Mehrabian's famous and often misquoted research suggests that when verbal and nonverbal messages conflict, people believe the nonverbal. Your body speaks louder than your vocabulary. The practical application begins with awareness. For the next 3 days, notice your speech patterns without trying to change them. How often do you interrupt? How frequently do you complain? When do you speak to fill silence rather than to communicate meaning? This observation phase is crucial. You cannot change what you haven't noticed. After 3 days, introduce a simple intervention, the 2-second pause. Before responding to any statement, especially emotional ones, pause for 2 full seconds. This brief delay allows your prefrontal cortex to engage, moving you from reaction to response. The 2-second pause will feel uncomfortable initially. You'll worry that others perceive you as slow or uncertain. The opposite is true. Research shows that people who pause before speaking are perceived as more confident, thoughtful, and authoritative. Master this single practice, and you've begun rewiring your relationship with language itself. Chapter 2: The Architecture of Constructive Communication. In 1995, psychologist John Gottman made a prediction that stunned the academic world. After observing couples interact for just 15 minutes, he could predict with 94% accuracy whether they would divorce within 6 years. His method didn't involve analyzing what couples discussed. It measured how they discussed it, specifically the ratio of positive to negative interactions during conflict. Gottman discovered that stable relationships maintained a ratio of approximately 5 to 1, 5 positive interactions for every negative one. Couples heading towards separation showed ratios closer to 0.8 to 1. This principle, known as the Gottman ratio, applies far beyond romantic relationships. It predicts team performance in organizations, classroom outcomes in education, and therapeutic success in clinical settings. The way humans speak to each other follows mathematical laws. But what constitutes a positive interaction? Gottman identified specific behaviors, expressing interest, showing affection, demonstrating care, appreciation, concern, empathy, being accepting, joking, and sharing joy. Negative interactions included criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, what Gottman famously called the 4 horsemen of relational collapse. Notice something important. These aren't personality traits, they're behaviors, and behaviors can be learned. Consider criticism versus complaint. A complaint addresses a specific behavior. I was worried when you didn't call. Criticism attacks character. You never think about anyone but yourself. The first invites resolution, the second invites war. Contempt, the most destructive behavior, involves speaking from a position of superiority through sarcasm, mockery, eye-rolling, or name-calling. Gottman's research found contempt to be the single greatest predictor of relationship failure. It's also correlated with weakened immune function in the person receiving it. Defensiveness seems reasonable when you feel attacked, but it escalates rather than resolves conflict. Meeting criticism with counter-criticism creates an endless loop where no one feels heard. The alternative, accepting even partial responsibility, breaks the cycle. Stonewalling occurs when one person withdraws entirely, refusing to engage. Physiologically, it's often a flooding response, the nervous system becoming so overwhelmed that shutdown feels like the only option. While it may seem like self-protection, it communicates rejection to the other person. The antidotes to these behaviors are specific and learnable. For criticism, use I statements describing your feelings and needs. For contempt, cultivate a culture of appreciation and respect. For defensiveness, accept responsibility for your part. For stonewalling, practice self-soothing and request breaks when overwhelmed. Maria Rodriguez, a hospital administrator in Sao Paulo, applied these principles systematically over 18 months. Her unit had the lowest employee satisfaction scores in the hospital. Exit interviews consistently mentioned toxic communication as the primary reason for leaving. Rodriguez began with herself. She recorded her own interactions for 2 weeks and counted the ratio of positive to negative statements. The result shocked her, 1.2 to 1, well below the 5 to 1 threshold for healthy relationships. She implemented what she called the appreciation audit. Before every meeting, she identified 3 specific contributions from team members that she would acknowledge publicly. She replaced questions like, "Why isn't this done?" with, "What obstacles are you facing?" She trained herself to respond to problems with curiosity rather than blame. The transformation wasn't immediate. For the first 3 months, her team was suspicious, assuming the change was temporary or strategic. But consistency breeds trust. By month 6, engagement scores had improved by 34%. By month 18, her unit had the highest satisfaction ratings in the hospital. The practical framework for constructive communication involves 4 components: observation, feeling, need, and request. Observation means describing what you perceive without evaluation. "You were 20 minutes late" is an observation. "You're always irresponsible" is an evaluation masquerading as fact. Feeling involves identifying your emotional response. This requires what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between similar emotions. Frustrated is different from disappointed, which is different from hurt. The more precisely you can name your feeling, the more effectively you can communicate it. Need refers to the universal human need underlying the feeling. Perhaps your need is for reliability, for connection, for consideration. Needs are universal and non-negotiable. Strategies for meeting them are variable. Request involves asking clearly for what would meet your need. "Would you be willing to text me if you're running late?" is a request. "Be more considerate" is a demand masquerading as a request. This framework, developed by psychologist Marshall Rosenberg as nonviolent communication, has been applied in corporate boardrooms, Middle Eastern peace negotiations, and family therapy sessions worldwide. Its power lies in its simplicity and universality.
The challenge isn't intellectual. Anyone can understand the framework in 15 minutes. The challenge is implementation, rewiring decades of reactive communication patterns. Begin with low-stakes interactions. Practice the observation, feeling, need, request model with service workers, acquaintances, and casual conversations. Build the neural pathways before applying them under pressure. Then gradually extend to higher-stakes situations. With practice, constructive communication becomes automatic, the default rather than the exception. Your relationships are not fixed. They're conversations that haven't happened yet.
Chapter 3. The Silent Power of Listening. In 2014, a curious study emerged from the University of Michigan. Researchers asked participants to list their 10 closest friends and predict how those friends would rank them. The results revealed a sobering asymmetry. Only 53% of perceived friendships were reciprocated. Nearly half of the people we consider close friends don't feel the same way about us. The researchers identified the primary differentiating factor: listening quality. Those who felt genuinely heard consistently rated relationships as closer. Those who felt merely tolerated rated them as distant, regardless of time spent together. Listening is not a passive act. It's perhaps the most powerful form of communication that exists. Neuroscience explains why. When someone truly listens to you, with presence, attention, and without agenda, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Your cortisol levels drop. Your prefrontal cortex activates, improving your own cognitive function. Being genuinely heard is neurologically similar to being touched with care. Yet most people don't listen. They wait. Researcher Ralph Nichols found that immediately after listening to a 10-minute presentation, average listeners retained only 50% of the information. Within 48 hours, retention dropped to 25%. We spend approximately 70% of our waking hours in some form of communication, but we're shockingly ineffective at its most fundamental component. The problem isn't capability, it's intention. There are multiple levels of listening, each progressively more powerful. Level 1 is downloading, pretending to listen while actually waiting for your turn to speak. Your mind is formulating responses rather than receiving information. This is the default mode for most conversations. Level 2 is factual listening, focusing on data and content. You're gathering information but missing emotional subtext. This is common in professional settings where efficiency is prioritized over connection. Level 3 is empathic listening, attending not just to words, but to feelings, needs, and unspoken concerns. You're listening with your whole body, noticing tone, pace, and body language. This level requires genuine presence. Level 4 is generative listening, listening for potential, for what's trying to emerge. This is the listening of great coaches, therapists, and leaders. It creates a space where speakers discover insights they didn't know they had. The Japanese concept of ma refers to the space between, the negative space that gives meaning to the positive. In conversation, ma is the pause, the silence, the breath. Western culture tends to fill these gaps anxiously. Master listeners protect them. Practical techniques for deeper listening begin with physical presence. Face the speaker fully. Uncross your arms. Put away devices. These actions signal receptivity to your own brain as much to the other person. Then practice reflecting, stating back what you heard in your own words. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed by the deadline and unsure where to get support. Is that accurate? This demonstrates understanding and invites correction if you've misread the situation. Resist the urge to solve.
When someone shares a problem, the automatic response is to offer solutions. But often people don't want solutions, they want to feel heard. Try asking, "Are you looking for advice, or would it help to just talk through this?" Finally, practice comfortable silence. When the speaker pauses, don't rush to fill the gap. Often the most meaningful insights emerge after silence, when the speaker has processed and is ready to go deeper.
Takeshi Matsumoto, a venture capitalist in Singapore, built his reputation on a single skill: listening. In a field dominated by aggressive personalities competing to display intelligence, Matsumoto rarely spoke in first meetings. He asked one or two carefully crafted questions, then listened with complete attention. Entrepreneurs who pitched to him consistently reported feeling truly seen for the first time. They shared ideas they hadn't intended to disclose, revealed concerns they usually hid, and left feeling energized rather than drained. His investment performance outpaced industry averages by 340% over a decade. When asked about his strategy, he replied, "I don't have special insight into markets. I have special insight into founders, and that comes from listening." The paradox of listening is that by taking less space, you gain more influence. By seeking to understand rather than to be understood, you become understood. By letting go of agenda, you achieve your actual goals. This isn't manipulation, it's the natural consequence of presence. When you genuinely listen, people genuinely trust you. And trust is the foundation of all meaningful influence. Begin today with a simple commitment, one conversation where your only goal is to understand, not to respond cleverly, not to share your experience, not to solve the problem, just to understand. Notice how it changes the conversation. Notice how it changes you. Part 2. Mastering the Mind. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Attention. In 2004, cognitive psychologist Daniel Simons conducted an experiment that would become famous. He showed participants a video of people passing basketballs and asked them to count the number of passes made by players in white shirts. Halfway through the video, a person in a gorilla costume walked through the center of the frame, faced the camera, beat their chest, and walked off. Roughly 50% of participants didn't see the gorilla. This phenomenon, inattentional blindness, reveals something profound about human cognition. We don't see reality. We see what we're paying attention to. Everything else becomes invisible. Your attention is the most valuable resource you possess. More valuable than money because money can be earned and saved, while attention, once spent, is gone forever. More valuable than time because time passes regardless of how you use it, while attention determines whether that time creates meaning. Yet most people have ceded control of their attention to forces that don't have their interests at heart. The average smartphone user touches their device 2,617 times per day. Social media platforms employ teams of behavioral psychologists whose explicit goal is to maximize time on platform, engineering applications to be as addictive as possible. The attention economy is worth hundreds of billions of dollars annually, and you are the product being sold. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's business model. But here's what the attention merchants don't want you to know. Attention can be trained. Like a muscle, it strengthens with deliberate use. The Buddhist tradition has cultivated attentional training for 2,500 years. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what meditators have long reported. Long-term attention practice physically changes the brain.
Dr. Sarah Lazar at Harvard demonstrated that just 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation increased cortical thickness in the hippocampus, learning and memory, and decreased density in the amygdala, fear and stress. Participants weren't just feeling calmer, their brains had structurally changed. The fundamental practice is remarkably simple. Choose an object of attention and notice when you've drifted away, then return. Repeat. This sounds almost insultingly basic, but within this simple loop is the mechanism of all mental training. Each time you notice distraction and return to focus, you're strengthening the neural circuits of voluntary attention. You're building the capacity to choose where your mind goes. Begin with breath. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and place attention on the sensation of breathing, perhaps at the nostrils, chest, or abdomen. Don't control the breath, simply observe it. Within seconds, your mind will wander. You'll think about what you need to do later, replay a conversation from yesterday, or wonder if you're doing this correctly. This is not failure. This is the exercise. Each wandering is an opportunity to practice returning. Start with 5 minutes daily. The duration matters less than consistency. 5 minutes daily builds more capacity than 30 minutes twice weekly. As basic attention strengthens, you can apply it to increasingly challenging contexts. During conversations, notice when your attention drifts to formulating responses, then return to listening. During work, notice when you've opened a website tab unconsciously, then return to the task. During meals, notice when you've stopped tasting food, then return to the experience. The goal isn't perfect, unbroken attention. That's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is reducing the gap between wandering and noticing, strengthening the capacity to choose your mental focus. Elena Varga, a software engineer in Berlin, had built a successful career despite chronic attention difficulties. She could focus intensely on problems that interested her, but struggled with administrative tasks, meetings, and sustained projects. Performance reviews consistently praised her creativity while noting concerns about follow-through. She began a daily attention practice, 10 minutes each morning before checking her phone. After 6 weeks, she noticed subtle changes. The compulsion to check notifications had weakened. She could remain present in meetings without the itching urge to escape into distraction. Complex projects that once seemed overwhelming now felt approachable. After 6 months, she received the first exceptional rating of her career. Her manager noted the same creativity as before, but now paired with reliability. Elena hadn't become more intelligent, she'd become more present. Beyond formal practice, environmental design profoundly impacts attention. Remove your phone from your bedroom. Disable non-essential notifications. Use website blockers during focused work. These aren't signs of weakness. They're strategic recognition that willpower is limited and environment is powerful. The Ulysses contract, named after the Greek hero who had himself tied to the mast to resist the siren's song, involves making binding decisions in advance that limit your future options. When Odysseus couldn't trust his future self to resist temptation, he removed the option entirely. This is wisdom, not weakness. Your attention is under assault. Forces with enormous resources are competing for access to your mind. The counterattack isn't complicated, but it is daily. Practice attention, and attention grows. Neglect it, and others will colonize the space. Choose carefully what you pay attention to. You're choosing what you become. Chapter 5. Rewriting the Mental Script. You are not your thoughts. This statement, central to both ancient contemplative traditions and modern cognitive therapy, seems paradoxical. If you're not your thoughts, then who is thinking them? And if thoughts arise without your choosing, how can you be responsible for your actions? The answer lies in distinguishing between thoughts and the awareness that observes them. Thoughts are mental events, arising, persisting briefly, and dissolving. They're produced by neural processes shaped by genetics, conditioning, experience, and random fluctuation. You don't choose your next thought no more than you choose your next heartbeat. But awareness is different. It's the capacity to notice thoughts, to examine them, to question their accuracy. And unlike thoughts themselves, awareness can be trained. Cognitive psychologist Aaron Beck discovered this principle clinically in the 1960s. Depressed patients, he noticed, weren't simply sad, they were trapped in repetitive thought patterns that distorted reality. I'm worthless, nothing will ever change, everyone would be better off without me. These thoughts felt like facts, but Beck realized they were interpretations, often inaccurate ones. When patients learned to examine their thoughts rather than automatically believing them, depression lifted.
This became cognitive behavioral therapy, now the most empirically validated form of psychotherapy. Its core mechanism is simple: identify thoughts, evaluate their accuracy, and replace distorted ones with more balanced alternatives. The common cognitive distortions are surprisingly consistent across individuals. All or nothing thinking, seeing situations in binary categories. If I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. Catastrophizing, expecting the worst possible outcome. If I make this mistake, I'll lose everything. Mind reading, assuming you know what others are thinking. They must think I'm incompetent. Fortune telling, predicting negative futures with unwarranted certainty. This will never work. Emotional reasoning, treating feelings as evidence. I feel like a failure, so I must be one. Should statements, rigid rules about how things must be. I should always be productive. Personalization, taking responsibility for things outside your control. It's my fault they are unhappy. Each distortion follows a predictable pattern, taking limited information, adding assumptions, and generating conclusions presented as certainties. The thoughts feel true because they arise automatically, without examination. The practice of cognitive restructuring involves 3 steps. First, identify the thought. When you notice a negative emotion, ask, "What was I just thinking?" Write it down exactly as it appeared. This externalization creates distance. You're now looking at the thought rather than from it. Second, evaluate the thought. Ask, what evidence supports this thought? What evidence contradicts it? What would I tell a friend who had this thought? What's a more balanced way to see this? Third, formulate an alternative. This isn't positive thinking, it's accurate thinking. The goal isn't to replace "I'll fail" with "I'll succeed," but with something like, "I might struggle, but I've overcome challenges before, and either way, I'll learn." Dr. David Burns, who popularized these techniques in his book Feeling Good, found that regular practice produced results comparable to antidepressant medication for moderate depression, without the side effects and with lower relapse rates. But cognitive restructuring isn't only for clinical populations. Everyone engages in cognitive distortion. The question is whether you examine your thoughts or simply obey them. James Okonkwo, a financial analyst in Lagos, appeared successful by external measures, but internally he was tormented by persistent thoughts of inadequacy. Despite promotions and praise, an internal voice insisted he was faking it and would soon be exposed. This is imposter syndrome, a pattern affecting approximately 70% of people at some point in their lives. But James didn't know it had a name. He assumed his thoughts were accurate assessments of his abilities. Through journaling, James began cataloging his thoughts.
He noticed the same themes recurring. You don't deserve this. They'll figure out you're not that smart. Everyone else knows what they're doing. He asked, "What's the evidence?" He listed his accomplishments, positive feedback, and objective measures of performance. The evidence contradicted the thoughts decisively. He asked, "What would I tell someone else?" If a colleague expressed these same fears with his same track record, would he agree with them? Obviously not. He formulated alternatives. I've earned my position through demonstrated skill. Feeling uncertain doesn't mean I am uncertain. I'm capable, even when I don't feel capable. The thoughts didn't disappear immediately, but their power diminished. They became mental noise rather than commands. You could notice them, acknowledge them, and choose not to act from them. This is the crucial shift from fusion with thoughts to observation of thoughts. You don't control what arises in your mind, but you absolutely control how you respond.
The practice requires consistency. Keep a thought journal. When you notice strong negative emotions, write down the triggering thought and work through the evaluation questions. Over time, the examination process becomes automatic, a habit of questioning rather than a habit of believing. Your mind generates approximately 70,000 thoughts daily. The vast majority are random, repetitive, and not particularly accurate. Treating every thought as truth is like believing every email in your inbox deserves equal attention. Learn to read your mental inbox with discernment. Not every thought deserves a response. Chapter 6. From Overthinking to Decisive Action. Analysis paralysis, rumination loops, mental quicksand. The human mind is extraordinarily powerful, capable of solving complex problems, imagining possibilities, and learning from experience. But this same capacity, when misdirected, becomes a prison. Instead of processing information toward resolution, the mind chews on the same material endlessly, generating anxiety without insight. Overthinking is not deep thinking. It's repetitive thinking that masquerades as productive effort while actually preventing action. The neuroscience is clear. Overthinking activates the default mode network, a collection of brain regions associated with self-referential thought, worry about the future, and rumination about the past. When this network dominates, the task-positive network, responsible for focused, goal-directed action, is suppressed. You cannot overthink and act simultaneously. The brain systems are antagonistic. Understanding why we overthink reveals the path out. 3 primary drivers operate. Uncertainty intolerance. Some people experience uncertainty as physically threatening. Their nervous systems react to not knowing with the same alarm as actual danger. Overthinking becomes an attempt to achieve certainty before acting. But complete certainty is impossible, so action never comes. Perfectionism. The belief that anything less than perfect is unacceptable creates paralysis. Every decision becomes loaded with existential weight. Choosing wrong feels catastrophic, so we postpone choosing indefinitely. Control illusion. Thinking about something can feel like doing something about it. The mental activity creates an illusion of progress while actually maintaining the status quo. The antidote isn't to think less, it's to think differently and then act. The first intervention is time boxing. Set explicit limits on deliberation. I will research this decision for 2 hours, then choose. The deadline creates urgency that breaks the endless loop. Parkinson's law applies. Work expands to fill available time. Without a boundary, thinking expands indefinitely. The second intervention is good enough decision-making.
Psychologist Barry Schwartz distinguishes between maximizers, who seek the best possible option, and satisficers, who seek an option that meets their criteria. Counterintuitively, satisficers report higher satisfaction with their decisions. By defining good enough criteria in advance and choosing the first option that meets them, you escape the endless comparison trap. The third intervention is action exposure. Take small actions before you feel ready. Action generates information that thinking cannot. A 5-minute experiment reveals more than 5 hours of speculation. Start before you're certain, and certainty will follow action rather than preceding it. The fourth intervention is worst-case planning. Instead of avoiding the worst case, examine it directly. If this decision turns out badly, what specifically happens? How would I handle that? What evidence suggests this worst case is likely? Often, direct examination reveals that worst-case scenarios are both unlikely and survivable, releasing the grip of fear.
Dr. Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia conducted research on what he calls affective forecasting, our predictions about how we'll feel in the future. His finding: humans are remarkably poor at predicting emotional responses to outcomes. We overestimate both how good outcomes will feel and how bad outcomes will feel. This suggests that the stakes we perceive in decisions are systematically exaggerated. The decision feels monumentally important, but future you will adapt to either outcome more easily than present you imagines. Amara Osei, an entrepreneur in Accra, built 3 successful businesses after nearly losing everything to overthinking. Her first venture, an e-commerce platform, failed not from market forces, but from delayed action. She spent 18 months perfecting her website, while competitors with inferior products captured the market. I told myself I was being careful, she recalls, but I was really being afraid. Every improvement I made raised the standard for launch. The site was never good enough because good enough kept moving. Her breakthrough came from a mentor who asked a simple question: what's the smallest possible version of this that could work? She launched a stripped-down version in 2 weeks. It had problems, customers complained, but it also generated revenue, feedback, and learning that no amount of planning could have provided. Her subsequent businesses launched faster, iterated quickly, and succeeded where the perfect approach had failed. The shift requires reframing failure. In an overthinking mindset, failure is something to avoid through better preparation. In an action mindset, failure is data. It's information about what works and what doesn't, available only through experimentation. Thomas Edison famously said he hadn't failed to make a light bulb, he'd discovered thousands of ways that didn't work. This reframe transforms failure from threat to resource. Practical implementation begins with noticing the overthinking loop. When you've circled the same considerations more than twice without new information, you're overthinking. Name it. This is the loop. The naming creates distance and interrupts the pattern. Then ask, what's the smallest action I can take in the next 10 minutes? Don't plan the whole path, just the next step. Action generates momentum, and momentum defeats paralysis. Finally, practice imperfect action deliberately. Do something badly on purpose. Send an email without rereading it 4 times. Make a decision with 70% confidence instead of waiting for 95%. Build tolerance for imperfection through repeated exposure. Your mind wants certainty. Life offers probability. The gap between them is where action lives. Stop thinking about crossing the gap. Start crossing. Part 3. Emotional Mastery. Chapter 7.
the science of emotional regulation. For most of Western history, emotions were considered the enemy of reason, chaotic forces to be suppressed by civilized minds. Stoic philosophers advocated for apatheia, freedom from emotional disturbance. Victorian culture prized emotional restraint as a mark of character. Even contemporary advice often frames emotions as problems to be managed. Modern neuroscience tells a different story. Emotions aren't opposed to rational thought, they're essential to it. Neurologist Antonio Damasio studied patients with damage to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area connecting emotional processing to decision-making. These patients could reason logically, but couldn't make simple decisions. Without emotional input, even choosing what to eat became impossible. Emotions are information systems. Fear alerts us to threats. Anger signals boundary violations. Sadness indicates loss requiring processing. Joy marks experiences worth repeating. Each emotion carries data relevant to survival and flourishing.
The problem isn't emotions themselves, it's our relationship to them. Psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research revolutionized our understanding of emotional experience. The traditional view held that emotions are universal, hardwired responses. Specific brain circuits produce specific feelings. Barrett's findings suggest something more interesting. Emotions are constructed. Your brain doesn't have emotion circuits that automatically produce fear, anger, or joy. Instead, it continuously predicts what's happening based on past experience and current context, then generates emotional experiences that make sense of bodily sensations. The same racing heart might be constructed as excitement at a party or anxiety before a presentation. This is simultaneously humbling and empowering. Emotions aren't direct readouts of reality, they're interpretations, and interpretations can be influenced. The practical implications are profound. If emotions are constructed, then you have more influence over your emotional life than the traditional model suggests. Not complete control. You can't simply decide to feel happy any more than you can decide to see blue as green, but influence. 3 leverage points exist: bodily state, interpretation, and response. Bodily state refers to the physical conditions your brain uses to construct emotions. Sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, lack of exercise, chronic stress, these shift the baseline from which emotions are generated. Someone running on 4 hours of sleep and 3 coffees will construct more anxious, irritable emotional experiences than the same person well-rested and calm. The interventions here are unsurprising but underutilized. Sleep 7 to 9 hours, eat regular nutritious meals, exercise several times weekly, practice stress reduction. These aren't just health advice, they're emotional regulation strategies. Interpretation involves how you make sense of situations and sensations. 2 people face the same presentation. One interprets the butterflies as excitement, the other as impending humiliation. Same physiology, different emotional experience. You can influence interpretation through reframing, seeing situations from alternative perspectives, cognitive restructuring, examining distorted thoughts, and granularity, developing more precise emotional vocabulary. Emotional granularity is particularly powerful. Research shows that people who can distinguish between many emotional states, not just bad, but specifically disappointed, frustrated, anxious, embarrassed, regulate emotions more effectively. The precision enables targeted response. If you feel bad, it's hard to know what to do.
If you feel specifically disappointed because you expected a different outcome, you can address that specifically. Response refers to what you do with emotions once they arise. Suppression, pushing emotions down and pretending they don't exist, is metabolically costly and paradoxically makes emotions stronger. Expression, acting out every emotional impulse, creates relational chaos and often intensifies the original feeling. The middle path is acknowledgement without fusion. Notice the emotion, name it, feel it in your body, and choose your response deliberately. I notice I'm feeling angry right now. The anger is in my chest and shoulders. I'm going to take 3 breaths before responding. This process, often called name it to tame it, activates the prefrontal cortex, which has inhibitory connections to the amygdala. Simply labeling an emotion reduces its intensity. Practical implementation begins with interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense internal body states. Most people live entirely in their heads, disconnected from the neck down. Emotions live in the body before they reach conscious awareness. Several times daily, pause and scan your body. What sensations do you notice? Tension in shoulders, tightness in chest, heaviness in stomach? Don't interpret yet, just observe. Over time, you'll notice patterns. Anxiety might show up as shallow breathing before you consciously feel worried. Anger might present as jaw tension before you recognize frustration. This early detection allows intervention before emotions escalate. When strong emotions arise, use the RAIN technique developed by meditation teacher Tara Brach. Recognize what's happening. I notice I'm feeling angry. Allow the experience to be there. Don't fight it, suppress it, or dramatize it. Just let it exist. Investigate with kindness. Where do I feel this in my body? What triggered this? What do I need right now? Nurture with self-compassion. Offer yourself the same kindness you'd offer a struggling friend. This process typically takes 60 to 90 seconds, the duration of a natural emotional wave when it isn't amplified by resistance or rumination. Dr. Amira Hassan, a cardiologist in Cairo, applied these principles after recognizing that her emotional reactivity was damaging both her health and her relationships. Diagnostic errors, she knew, increase under stress, and her stress was constant. She began with bodily state, prioritizing sleep, eating regular meals rather than skipping them during long shifts, and walking daily. Within weeks, her emotional baseline shifted. Situations that previously triggered explosions now produced manageable irritation. She developed emotional vocabulary, moving from stressed to more specific terms: overwhelmed, underappreciated, uncertain, time-pressured. The precision enabled targeted response, delegating when overwhelmed, communicating needs when underappreciated, seeking information when uncertain. She practiced RAIN during difficult interactions, taking micro-pauses to recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture before responding. Her reputation transformed from brilliant but difficult to brilliant and composed. The goal isn't emotional flatness. Emotions carry important information and enrich life's texture. The goal is emotional flexibility, the capacity to experience emotions fully without being controlled by them, to respond thoughtfully rather than react automatically. This capacity, more than any external achievement, determines quality of life. Someone with emotional mastery experiences difficulty without drowning in it, enjoys success without attaching to it, and navigates relationships with presence and skill. The work is daily. The rewards are permanent. Chapter 8. Transforming Anger into Power. Anger is perhaps most misunderstood emotion. Some traditions condemn it absolutely. Anger is sin, weakness, or spiritual failure. Other perspectives celebrate it, righteous anger as fuel for justice and change. The truth is more nuanced. Anger itself is morally neutral. What matters is what you do with it. Evolutionarily, anger served clear functions. It mobilized energy to face threats, signaled to others that boundaries had been crossed, and motivated action to correct injustice. Without anger, our ancestors would have been easily exploited. But context has changed faster than neurobiology. The anger response that helped our ancestors survive predators and territorial rivals now activates in response to traffic jams, email delays, and social media disagreements. The system that evolved for genuine threats now triggers for inconveniences. The physiology of anger is distinctive. Increased heart rate, blood pressure spike, adrenaline and cortisol surge, blood flow to extremities. This is preparation for physical confrontation, but physical confrontation is rarely appropriate in modern contexts. So we face a mismatch, an ancient system generating responses that don't fit contemporary situations. The first step in transforming anger is recognizing its warning function. Anger signals that something you care about is being threatened, a value, a boundary, a goal, a relationship. The signal is valuable even when the response needs modification.
Ask, what is this anger protecting? What do I care about that feels threatened? Sometimes the answer reveals legitimate concerns. Your boundary was genuinely violated. An injustice actually occurred. Someone you care about was genuinely harmed. The anger is proportionate to the situation. Other times, examination reveals distortion. The threat is imagined or exaggerated. You're personalizing something that isn't personal. Your expectations were unrealistic. The anger is disproportionate. This distinction determines appropriate response. For proportionate anger with legitimate concerns, the question becomes, what action would actually address this situation? Exploding rarely solves problems. It alienates allies, damages relationships, and often obscures the legitimate issue beneath emotional reaction. Effective response typically involves clear, calm communication of the boundary violation and its consequences. When you committed to Friday delivery and it arrived Tuesday, I had to cancel a presentation. I need to trust commitments. If Friday is unrealistic, tell me so we can plan accordingly. Notice what this isn't: yelling, insulting, catastrophizing, generalizing, you always do this, or passive aggression. It's specific, direct, and focused on resolution rather than punishment. For disproportionate anger with distorted perceptions, the appropriate response is internal work, examining the thoughts driving the anger, questioning their accuracy, and developing more balanced perspectives. Both responses require the same first step: pause. The anger impulse pushes toward immediate action: say something, do something, make someone pay. This impulse evolved when immediate action was necessary for survival. But in nearly all contemporary situations, pausing improves outcomes. The physiological anger response lasts approximately 20 minutes if you don't continue fueling it with angry thoughts. During this window, decision-making is impaired. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment, planning, and impulse control, is suppressed, while the amygdala dominates. Waiting 20 minutes before responding to anger isn't weakness, it's neurological wisdom. The same situation will look different once the chemical storm subsides. During the pause, several techniques accelerate return to baseline. Physical discharge: walk, run, or do push-ups. The body is prepared for action. Give it action that doesn't cause harm.
Cold exposure, cold water on face or wrists, activates the dive reflex, which slows heart rate and promotes parasympathetic activation. Slow breathing, extending the exhale longer than the inhale, directly stimulates the vagus nerve, triggering relaxation response. Distance, if possible, physically leave the situation. Space supports perspective. Victor Johansson, a construction foreman in Stockholm, had a reputation for explosive anger. His competence was unquestioned, his projects finished on time and under budget, but his team turnover was twice the industry average, and 3 harassment complaints had nearly ended his career. The turning point came during a conflict with a subcontractor whose delay threatened a critical deadline. Victor felt the familiar rage rising, face flushing, fists clenching, voice preparing to shout. But something different happened. Instead of exploding, he heard himself say, "I need 15 minutes. We'll continue then." He walked to his car, sat in silence, and noticed his body. Racing heart, tight jaw, shallow breath. He didn't try to calm down, he just observed. After 15 minutes, the intensity had dropped by half. He returned to the conversation and addressed the delay directly, firmly, but without the verbal assault that would have followed his old pattern. The subcontractor, surprised by the professionalism, became unexpectedly cooperative. The deadline was met, and Victor had discovered something more valuable than the project's completion. He had options he didn't know he had.
Over the following months, Victor refined his approach. He identified his anger triggers, incompetence, disrespect, dishonesty, developed early warning signals, the first flush of heat before full anger, and created standard responses, the 15-minute walk, the focus on solutions over blame. His reputation shifted. He was still demanding, standards hadn't dropped, but he was no longer feared. People wanted to work with him rather than avoiding him. The transformation illustrates a crucial point. Mastering anger doesn't mean eliminating it. It means channeling it productively. Anger carries enormous energy. Suppressed, that energy causes internal damage, increased cardiovascular risk, chronic tension, depression. Expressed explosively, it damages relationships and often makes situations worse. Channeled effectively, it powers boundary setting, justice seeking, and sustained effort toward meaningful goals. The great social movements of history were fueled by anger at injustice, anger that was channeled into organized, strategic action rather than random violence. The civil rights movement, women's suffrage, labor rights, all powered by legitimate anger, transformed into effective change. Your anger, properly directed, is a resource, not something to fear or suppress, something to understand and deploy. When you master anger, you don't become passive, you become powerful.
Chapter 9. Building Emotional Resilience. Life will break you. Not might, will. You will face loss, failure, betrayal, illness, and death. Plans will collapse, relationships will end, bodies will fail, dreams will die. This isn't pessimism, it's preparation. Emotional resilience isn't about avoiding adversity, it's about developing the capacity to recover from it. The research on resilience reveals something surprising. It's not primarily about individual traits. The most significant predictor of resilience isn't optimism, intelligence, or even mental health history. It's the quality of relationships. Dr. George Vaillant, director of the longest longitudinal study of adult development at Harvard, followed 724 men for over 75 years. His conclusion: the key to healthy aging is relationships, relationships, relationships.
People with strong social connections recover faster from setbacks, maintain better health under stress, and report higher life satisfaction regardless of circumstances. The research is unequivocal. Human beings are designed for connection, and isolation is toxic. This suggests that building resilience begins with investing in relationships, not waiting until crisis to reach out, but cultivating connection during calm periods. The friend you can call at 3 a.m. isn't made during the crisis, they're made in the years before it. But relationships aren't the only factor. Individual practices also matter. Post-traumatic growth research reveals that many people don't just recover from adversity, they grow through it. They develop greater appreciation for life, stronger relationships, clearer priorities, and deeper sense of personal strength. The question becomes, what distinguishes those who grow from those who merely endure? Researchers identify several key practices. Deliberate rumination differs from depressive rumination. The latter is passive, repetitive, and focused on victimhood. The former is active, intentional, and focused on meaning-making. People who deliberately process adversity through journaling, therapy, or structured reflection show greater post-traumatic growth than those who either suppress the experience or passively replay it. The questions that prompt deliberate rumination include, what have I learned about myself from this experience? How has this changed my priorities? What strengths did I discover I have? What relationships deepened through this difficulty?
Benefit finding involves identifying positive consequences within negative experiences, not denying the pain, but holding it alongside any growth. The loss of a job might lead to a better career path discovered only because the previous one ended. The end of a relationship might reveal patterns that, once recognized, enable healthier future connections. This isn't toxic positivity, pretending everything happens for a reason or that suffering is secretly good. Some experiences are simply terrible, with no silver lining. Benefit finding means remaining open to growth while fully acknowledging pain. Flexible thinking allows shifting between perspectives and adapting to changing circumstances. Rigid thinkers get stuck in one way of seeing situations. Flexible thinkers can zoom out, consider alternative viewpoints, and adjust strategies when initial approaches fail. One technique for developing flexibility is the 10-10-10 framework. How will I feel about this situation in 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years? Often, the intensity of current distress doesn't match the long-term significance of the situation. Active coping means taking action to address problems rather than avoiding, denying, or passively hoping they resolve. This doesn't mean having solutions for everything. Some problems can't be solved. But within any situation, there are actions available: seeking support, gathering information, adjusting goals, finding meaning. The opposite of active coping is learned helplessness, the belief that nothing you do matters, so action is pointless. Psychologist Martin Seligman discovered that helplessness is learned through repeated experiences of uncontrollable negative outcomes. It can also be unlearned through experiences of effective action. Ibrahim Mensa lost everything in a warehouse fire in Lagos, Nigeria: inventory, equipment, and the savings he'd invested to start over after an earlier business failure. At 53, he was worse than where he'd started. Creditors called daily, his marriage was strained, his children's education uncertain. For 2 months, he barely functioned. He couldn't sleep, couldn't plan, couldn't see any path forward. Depression settled in like a permanent resident. The turning point came through an old friend who simply showed up. No advice, no solutions, just presence. They walked together every morning for 30 minutes.
Ibrahim talked or didn't talk. His friend just walked beside him. Slowly, something shifted. The walking became ritual, then comfort, then foundation. From that foundation, small actions became possible. One call to a potential partner, one revised business plan, one conversation with his wife about how they'd weather this together. 2 years later, Ibrahim's new business was more successful than the one he'd lost. But he was clear about what had changed him. I didn't rebuild alone. I rebuilt because someone walked with me when I couldn't walk myself. The story illustrates both the relational and individual dimensions of resilience. The friend provided connection that interrupted isolation, but Ibrahim also engaged in deliberate processing, benefit finding, and active coping. Both elements were necessary. Building resilience is proactive work done before crisis, not after. Strengthen relationships when times are good. Develop emotional regulation skills during calm periods. Build habits of active coping through small challenges. Create meaning and purpose that can anchor you when storms hit. Because storms will hit. The question isn't whether you'll face adversity, it's whether you'll have built the capacity to emerge from it stronger. Part 4. Financial Intelligence. Chapter 10. Rewiring Your Money Mind. Your financial life is governed by invisible rules, beliefs about money absorbed in childhood, operating beneath conscious awareness, shaping every financial decision you make.
Financial psychologist Brad Klontz calls these money scripts, internal narratives about what money means, whether you deserve it, and how it should be treated. Most people have never examined their money scripts. They simply live by them. Consider some common money scripts. Money is the root of all evil. This script associates wealth with moral corruption, creating unconscious resistance to accumulating it. People holding this belief often sabotage their own financial success. There will never be enough. This scarcity script generates constant anxiety regardless of actual resources. People who grew up in genuine scarcity often carry this script into abundance, never feeling secure no matter how much they have. Money makes everything better. This worship script treats money as solution to all problems, leading to endless pursuit that never satisfies. If money made everything better, wealthy people would be uniformly happy. They're not. I don't deserve money. This avoidance script undermines earning and keeping wealth through beliefs about unworthiness. People with this script often unconsciously give away or lose money to maintain their self-image. If I have money, others won't have enough. This zero-sum script treats wealth as finite. Your gain is someone else's loss. It generates guilt about accumulation and resistance to prosperity. These scripts feel like facts because they've been running so long, but they're just beliefs, inherited, absorbed, unexamined. The first step to financial transformation is identifying your money scripts. How did your family talk about money? What were the explicit and implicit messages? What did you conclude about wealthy people, about poor people, about yourself and money? Journal on these questions without censoring. The scripts that cause the most damage are usually the ones we're least aware of. Once identified, money scripts can be examined. Is this belief accurate? Does it serve me? What would a more balanced belief look like? For example, money is evil might become money is neutral. It amplifies existing character rather than creating new character. This reframe allows accumulation without moral anxiety. There will never be enough might become I have enough for today and I'm building security for tomorrow. This reframe acknowledges legitimate planning while releasing present moment scarcity.
The examination process isn't one time, it's ongoing. Money scripts are deeply embedded and resurface under stress. Regular reflection keeps them conscious and manageable. Beyond individual scripts, cultural conditioning shapes financial behavior. Consumer culture encourages spending as identity expression and status signaling. Social media amplifies comparison, showing curated highlight reels that make others' lives seem more affluent than they are. Understanding these forces doesn't eliminate their influence, but it creates choice. You can recognize the impulse to buy something for status rather than utility and decide whether to follow it. Behavioral economics reveals systematic irrationalities in financial decisions. Loss aversion makes us feel losses approximately twice as intensely as equivalent gains, causing excessive risk avoidance and difficulty cutting losing investments. Present bias makes present rewards more attractive than larger future rewards, causing undersaving and debt accumulation. Mental accounting treats money differently depending on source or category. A bonus gets spent more freely than salary, even though money is fungible. Awareness of these biases enables counter strategies. Automatic transfers to savings accounts bypass present bias. Framing savings as paying yourself first rather than restricting spending shifts the emotional calculus. Treating all income as fungible prevents artificial categories that distort decision-making.
The goal isn't to become perfectly rational. That's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is to recognize where irrationality operates and design systems that work with human psychology rather than against it. Priya Sharma, an accountant in Mumbai, earned well but accumulated nothing. Each raise led to lifestyle inflation that absorbed the additional income. At 40, she had less saved than she'd earned in a single year. Examining her money scripts revealed the source. Her father had worked his entire life for a company that went bankrupt just before his retirement, losing his pension. The implicit lesson Priya absorbed: saving is pointless because it can be taken away. Better to enjoy money now. This script made sense given her history, but it wasn't serving her. Her father's experience didn't prove that saving was pointless. It proved that diversification and protection matter. Priya developed a new script. Building security is how I protect my future self. She automated savings to bypass her spending impulses. She diversified investments to address the concentration risk that had harmed her father. She tracked spending to identify where money went unconsciously. 5 years later, her net worth had increased by more than her total earnings during that period, the power of compound growth on consistent saving. But the deeper change was psychological. She felt secure for the first time in her adult life. Your relationship with money isn't fixed. It was constructed, and it can be reconstructed. The beliefs running your financial life aren't truths, they're hypotheses that can be tested and revised. Examine the money mind you inherited, then build the one you choose. Chapter 11. The Architecture of Wealth Building. Wealth building isn't mysterious. The principles are simple enough to fit on an index card. Spend less than you earn, invest the difference, give it time, repeat. If wealth building is so simple, why do most people fail to build wealth? Because simple isn't the same as easy. Simple means the concepts are straightforward. Easy means the execution is effortless. Wealth building is simple but not easy because it requires working against powerful psychological forces: present bias, lifestyle inflation, social comparison, and the deeply human desire for immediate gratification.
The first principle, spend less than you earn, requires creating a gap between income and expenses. This gap, invested consistently, becomes the foundation of wealth. Most people approach this backward. They pay bills, buy what they want, and save whatever remains. This approach fails because whatever remains is usually nothing. Expenses expand to fill available income. The alternative is to save first, then spend what remains. Automated transfers to savings and investment accounts on payday ensure that saving happens before the money becomes available for spending. This isn't willpower, it's system design. The second principle, invest the difference, means putting money to work generating returns rather than letting it sit idle. A dollar saved in a checking account loses purchasing power to inflation every year. The same dollar invested in diversified assets historically grows over time. The power of compound growth is difficult to grasp intuitively. Small differences in return rates or time horizons produce enormous differences in outcomes. $10,000 invested at 7% annual return becomes approximately $76,000 after 30 years. The same amount at 10% becomes approximately $175,000. Time is the multiplier that transforms modest savings into significant wealth. The third principle, give it time, requires patience that contradicts every instinct of immediate gratification. Wealth building is boring. Exciting investments, day trading, cryptocurrency speculation, options trading, usually destroy wealth rather than building it. Patient, consistent investing in diversified assets lacks drama but delivers results.
The fourth principle, repeat, means making saving and investing habitual rather than occasional. Sporadic efforts produce sporadic results. Consistent behavior over decades produces transformation. These principles apply regardless of income level. Someone earning a modest salary who saves 20% and invests consistently will accumulate more wealth than someone earning 5 times as much who spends everything. Income creates opportunity. Behavior determines outcomes. Beyond the core principles, several practices accelerate wealth building. Tracking expenses reveals where money actually goes versus where you think it goes. The gap is usually significant and surprising. Most people can identify 15 to 20% of spending that could be redirected without meaningful lifestyle impact. Understanding the difference between assets and liabilities clarifies financial decisions. Assets put money in your pocket. Liabilities take money out. A car that depreciates while requiring insurance, maintenance, and fuel is a liability, even if it feels like an asset. The distinction isn't about avoiding liabilities entirely. It's about conscious choice rather than confused categorization. Avoiding lifestyle inflation, the tendency for spending to rise with income, preserves the gap between earning and spending. Each raise or bonus offers a choice: increase lifestyle or increase savings. The disciplined choice is to direct at least half of any income increase to savings before adjusting lifestyle. Minimizing fees and taxes requires attention that pays significant dividends. Investment fees of 1% versus 0.1% seem trivial, but compound dramatically over decades. Tax-advantaged accounts, retirement accounts, education savings provide guaranteed returns through tax deferral or elimination. These details matter more than most investment decisions. Building emergency reserves creates stability that enables good decision-making. Without reserves, every financial disruption becomes a crisis, requiring debt, distressed selling, or desperate measures. With reserves covering 3 to 6 months of expenses, disruptions become inconveniences that can be weathered calmly. Chen Wei, a factory manager in Shenzhen, started with nothing.
His parents were farmers who never handled money beyond subsistence. He had no financial education, no inheritance, no connections. At 25, he earned a modest salary and saved nothing. His co-workers, earning the same, lived the same way. None of them expected anything different. One night, unable to sleep, he calculated. If he saved nothing for the next 40 years, he would have nothing. If he saved 10% of his salary, invested at modest returns, he would have enough to retire comfortably. If he saved 20%, he could retire early. The math was simple. The execution was hard. He started with 5%, barely noticeable from each paycheck. After 6 months, he increased to 10%, then 15%. Each increase required adjustment, then became normal. His lifestyle didn't deteriorate, it simply stopped inflating. 20 years later, at 45, his net worth exceeded his total lifetime earnings. Compound growth had worked its magic. Colleagues earning similar salaries throughout their careers had accumulated almost nothing. The secret isn't intelligence or luck. The secret is starting and not stopping. Wealth building is democratic. It doesn't require special skills, connections, or starting capital. It requires understanding the principles, designing systems that implement them, and maintaining consistency over time. The path is available to anyone willing to walk it. Chapter 12. Increasing income through value creation. There are 2 approaches to improving financial position: reduce expenses or increase income. Both matter, but they're not equally powerful.
Expense reduction has natural limits. You can cut your budget to 0, but no further. And aggressive cutting often sacrifices quality of life, relationships, and opportunities. There's a floor below which reduction becomes counterproductive. Income increase has no ceiling. The potential is theoretically unlimited, and income increases often enhance rather than diminish quality of life, opening possibilities that restricted budgets foreclose. Most financial advice focuses on expense reduction because it's controllable. You can decide today to cancel subscriptions and eat at home. Income increase feels less controllable, dependent on employers, markets, and luck. But income increase is more controllable than it appears. The lever is value creation. Money flows toward value. People and organizations pay for solutions to problems, satisfaction of needs, and delivery of results. The more value you can create, the more income you can command. This principle operates regardless of employment structure. Employees who create exceptional value get promoted, receive raises, and attract competing offers. Freelancers who deliver superior results can charge premium rates. Entrepreneurs who solve important problems can build wealth-generating businesses. The question becomes, how do you increase the value you create? The first lever is skill development. Skills are the foundation of value creation. A surgeon creates more value than an orderly, not because of harder work, but because of higher skill. Investing in skills that are valuable, rare, and difficult to automate positions you for income growth. Which skills to develop? Look for the intersection of 3 circles: what you're capable of becoming excellent at, what the market values highly, and what you find engaging enough to persist through the difficult early stages of skill building. Programming, data analysis, negotiation, sales, project management, specialized technical knowledge. These skills command premium compensation because they create substantial value and are relatively rare. The second lever is positioning. Where you apply your skills matters enormously. The same software engineer might earn vastly different amounts depending on employer, industry, and geography. Positioning yourself in high-value contexts amplifies the return on your skills.
This doesn't necessarily mean chasing the highest-paying opportunities. It means being strategic about where your skills can create and capture the most value. Sometimes that's a well-paying job at a large company. Sometimes it's a less certain path with higher upside. The third lever is leverage. Leverage means decoupling income from time. An employee trading hours for wages has limited leverage. There are only so many hours. A consultant creating systems or templates that can be sold repeatedly has more leverage. An entrepreneur building a business that operates without constant involvement has maximum leverage. There are multiple forms of leverage: financial leverage, using borrowed money to amplify returns; labor leverage, employing others to multiply output; product leverage, creating things that can be sold infinitely; and audience leverage, building attention that can be monetized. Not everyone needs or wants maximum leverage, but understanding the concept reveals why some people generate enormous income while others plateau despite comparable skill and effort.
The fourth lever is visibility. Value that isn't visible isn't valued. Many skilled people remain underpaid because decision-makers don't know what they can do. Building reputation, developing relationships, and communicating accomplishments aren't self-promotion. They're ensuring that your value creation gets recognized and rewarded. Fatima Oyelaran, a logistics specialist in Johannesburg, spent 10 years as a reliable but invisible contributor. She solved complex problems, met every deadline, and received modest raises with positive reviews. She was the definition of good employee. At 35, she noticed something: colleagues with inferior skills but superior visibility were advancing faster. They volunteered for high-profile projects, presented at company meetings, and ensured their contributions were seen by decision-makers. Fatima found self-promotion distasteful, but she recognized that her invisibility was a choice with consequences. She decided to experiment. She began documenting her contributions, quantifying cost savings, efficiency improvements, and problems solved. She volunteered to present quarterly logistics reports to senior leadership. She built relationships with decision-makers through informal conversations and collaborative projects. Within 2 years, her income had increased by 65%. She hadn't become more skilled, she'd become more visible. Beyond employment, creating multiple income streams reduces vulnerability and accelerates wealth building. Relying entirely on a single employer means your financial life depends on decisions beyond your control. Side income, consulting, freelancing, small businesses, investments, diversifies risk and creates options. The principle underlying all income growth is simple: solve valuable problems for people willing to pay. This might mean developing rare skills, positioning yourself strategically, building leverage, increasing visibility, or creating additional income streams. The specific path varies. The principle remains constant. Money isn't attracted to need, desire, or fairness. It's attracted to value. Focus on creating it, and income follows. Conclusion: the integrated life. You began this book, perhaps, looking for tips, techniques for speaking better, thinking clearer, feeling calmer, earning more. Tips are useful, but they're not the point. The point is integration. The 4 pillars: speech, thought, emotion, and finances aren't separate domains requiring separate solutions. They're interconnected aspects of a single life. Master one, and the others strengthen. Neglect one, and the others weaken. Consider how they interact. Disordered thinking generates disordered emotions. Anxiety about imagined futures, rumination about past mistakes. These thought patterns create emotional turbulence that requires more than emotional techniques to resolve. The root is cognitive. Unregulated emotions generate disordered speech. Anger produces harsh words. Fear produces defensive speech. Shame produces silence when speaking is needed. Emotional mastery enables intentional communication. Financial stress undermines everything. Research consistently shows that financial worry reduces cognitive bandwidth, impairs decision-making, damages relationships, and increases emotional reactivity. Economic security is foundational, not separate. Careless speech damages relationships that provide emotional support and economic opportunity. Words create or destroy the connections that sustain resilience and enable success. Each domain affects every other. This is why isolated interventions often fail. addressing symptoms while ignoring causes, treating one area while the interconnected whole remains dysfunctional. The path to transformation isn't complicated. It's comprehensive. Begin where you most need improvement. If your speech creates constant conflict, start there. If your thoughts generate unrelenting anxiety, address the cognitive patterns. If your emotions drive self-destructive behavior, focus on regulation. If your finances create constant stress, prioritize stability. But don't stop there. As one domain stabilizes, extend to the next. The goal is integrated mastery, a life where speech, thought, emotion, and finances work together rather than against each other. This isn't quick work. It's not a weekend project or a 30-day challenge. It's the work of years, perhaps a lifetime. But every day of practice moves you forward. Every small improvement creates momentum. Every new skill becomes foundation for the next. The alternative is drift. The default path leads to reactive speech that damages relationships, disordered thinking that generates suffering, unregulated emotions that drive poor decisions, and financial chaos that constrains every other possibility. The choice is yours. Not once, but continuously, in each moment of speech, thought, emotion, and spending. Each moment offers the choice between the default path and the intentional one. Each moment is an opportunity to practice mastery. You have the capacity for transformation. Not because you're special, because you're human. The same neural plasticity that enables learning language, developing skills, and adapting to new environments enables rewriting habitual patterns of speech, thought, emotion, and financial behavior. The research is clear. The practices are available. The choice is yours. What will you build? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The journey of self-mastery begins with the next word you speak, the next thought you notice, the next emotion you acknowledge, the next dollar you allocate. It begins now.